Happy New Year, Wise Squirrel. It's going to be a great year. Welcome to Wise Squirrels, the podcast for late diagnosed adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Dave Delaney. As a lifelong podcaster, I'm almost at 20 years of podcasting, and I'm always tinkering and finding new tools and new things to check out. And I recently came across something called Raphonic, I believe it's pronounced. This is not an endorsement for Raphonic or whatever they're called, but it's an aggregator that aggregates reviews for podcasts, among other things. And so I've embedded it on the podcast page at wisesquirrels.com/podcast. But the reason why I mentioned it is because it dug up all these reviews that I'm embarrassed to say I've never seen. And I'm ashamed to admit that. Unfortunately, some of the reviews I miss because they're on different platforms or they're on different Apple Podcasts or different Spotify accounts in different countries. So very quickly, I wanted to give a shout out to a few people I've missed, like Emmy Lou in Canada, my home and native land, who wrote, "Thank you for your podcast. I'm enjoying listening to them at high speed, LOL," which was mentioned in some, and now I know why I prefer that. Haha. I'm 30 years old and was never diagnosed until this year, and I finally decided to get tested and was told, yeah, you're like 100% of the questions. I'm a girl and have the typical girl ADHD, inattentive ADHD. I wish I'd been diagnosed younger. The generic traits are all there, although many of them also were not diagnosed and still aren't. Getting diagnosed here was actually really depressing to me, the actual process, as I had not completely advocated for myself, went out of my own way and paid to be tested. I would not have been diagnosed. I was told by a psychiatrist once when visiting for anxiety that I don't have any flags for ADHD. I found it is still so focused on the typical hyperactive boy ADHD. And I've been diagnosed with major depression, disorder, and anxiety and panic attacks, OCD symptoms, etc. since a preteen, and the meds and years of therapy have never cured, air quotes. I just learned to cope and accept that I'm gonna be this way forever. I'm now a few months into being diagnosed with ADHD, and so many things add up. I saw a TikTok on rejection sensitive dysphoria, RSD, and that was the biggest flag to me that, hey, you really need to bite the bullet and get tested, because my entire life, that is how I felt. Emmy Lou, thanks so much for this review and for sharing so much with us. It's really kind of you, and I appreciate it. Some other reviews I saw, one on Castbox, says, brilliant episode. So many OMG. Yes, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly how it feels. That's from Annie Meadows. Miss Boke wrote, love, love, love. Fantastic listen. That Miss Boke is in the UK. So of course I missed that. So sorry about that. On Audible, James wrote, the more I listen, the more I learn about myself. Thank you so much for creating this. Very recently, my counselor gave me an evaluation that indicated I have ADHD. I'm 57 years old and pretty much knew I had it my entire life. I just never thought about it until it started seriously interfering with what I wanted to accomplish. I know that feeling. Now I am getting a therapist, so I can make it official. The more I listen to this, the more I see myself reflected. If I had any real doubts about my diagnosis, they're gone now. Thanks, James. One last review over again at Podcast Addict. Dave is a great host. His guests are very knowledgeable, and that's from Philly Code Hound a year ago. So sorry for just now getting back to you on that. Thank you so much again for leaving the reviews. If you love what I'm doing on the show, the best way to give back is to visit wisesquirrels.com/love. I even included a link to it right in your podcast player. All you have to do is click it, visit that page, and there's plenty of ways that you can support the show. You can leave a review, tell your friends, you can become a paid member, and there are lots of perks I'm working on for that this year, so stay tuned for that. And there's also a way to sponsor the podcast. So if you're interested in sponsoring the show, I have details about that there. And last but not least, you can hire me as a coach and also as a keynote speaker who can come to your company or your conference and speak about this and many more topics. Today, we're diving deep into the journey of adult ADHD diagnosis, a journey that's both profound and it's practical. My guest, Antonia Bowring, is not only a seasoned executive coach and author, but also a passionate ADHD advocate who brings personal experience and professional insights to the table. I've really been enjoying her TikTok channel if you haven't checked it out yet. And she was kind enough to send me a copy of her book, which I haven't finished yet, but I did read the chapter on ADHD and it's great. We're going to be exploring how undiagnosed ADHD can manifest as lifelong knife nicks, leading to shame and self-doubt and trauma, and how a diagnosis can be the first step towards healing and reclaiming your narrative. Antonia also shares actionable strategies from habit formation to planning systems to help Wise Squirrels thrive in our personal and professional lives. Together, we're going to touch on the heritability of ADHD and how it can influence family dynamics and the power of reframing productivity as self-care. Whether you're seeking tools to organize your week or inspiration to embrace your neurodivergence, this episode has something for everyone. So sit back and relax or keep running on that treadmill and enjoy the show.
The adult diagnosis is what I would call like a profound and practical journey because I just got off a call with a 54-year-old guy who works in sales, who got a diagnosis a year ago and had told me about job losses and things he just didn't understand why and I'm going to use his words, wasn't normal.
Right.
So he's now in his early 50s. And like there's this whole profound piece that he has to integrate, right? Mm-hmm. That he has to make sense of, that he has to heal. Like all those little everyday things for a lifetime are like nicks, you know?
Yeah.
A lot of knife nicks that really add up to, I'm going to use that word trauma. Mm-hmm. And that's like a real profound journey. And then just at the same time, we got to pay the bills. We got to pick our kids up on time. Mm-hmm. We got to get taxes in. We got to, show up with the presentation ready. And, yep. And you can't let go of building up your scaffolding to achieve those practical goals, because we want to be seen as reliable, responsible human beings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to me, it's like this integration and dance of both parts.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that, at least in my own case, and through therapy and all that, you learn that like you've been trying to course correct your whole life, unknown that you have ADHD, right? So you've been trying to... And you've been told you're a failure by, people, parents, whomever, schools, teachers, so many people that I forget this stat.
You believe it.
Yeah, you start to believe it. And you hear all this negative talk, and then you develop negative self-talk as well. And then once you are diagnosed and you receive treatment, hopefully you can start, as you said, like start healing from that trauma. I think trauma also comes from, because of how heritable ADHD is, they say, just about almost as heritable as height. There's like about an 80% chance that one or both of your parents also has ADHD. And then you start thinking...
My mother, for sure.
Yeah, and you start thinking if they were not diagnosed ever, and perhaps not with us anymore, as in the case of my dad, you start to realize some of the trauma that you might have experienced was in part because of their undiagnosed ADHD. And so that helps with forgiveness and empathy.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. It's funny because I think about the home where I grew up, and I remember the fights. My parents did a lot of traveling between Victoria and Vancouver because of my dad's work. And they would have these fights every time because the way my mother would pack the car, because she definitely had undiagnosed ADHD, was like little plastic bags with things in that I forgot this. And so they would arrive with like a multitude of small plastic bags with one thing in them. Right.
Yeah. Right.
And we could never find Scotch tape or scissors or car keys. They were now I am like obsessed with those things living in their place, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny though.
It's funny.
Because you develop these coping mechanisms where, like I've said it on the show before to some folks as well, but like I'm extremely punctual, like anal with punctuality. Like I'm always on time everywhere. And of course, I always equated it to my dad being punctual and like, but what I've learned, again, same sort of thing as a coping mechanism of like just making sure I'm not late. So I'll show up places early. But it's the same sort of deal, like you knowing where the scissors are, knowing where the Scotch tape is, knowing that it's packed or, you know, if you're traveling or whatever. So tell me a little bit about your journey. So yeah, Vancouver, you started in Vancouver and you're in New York now, in New York City. Tell me about a little bit about that journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make it very brief. I worked in international microfinance for a long time. So I traveled all over but was very drawn to New York. I'm sure the energy, right?
Yeah, it's great.
And ended up living here like on and off out of a suitcase, doing the kind of Canadian NAFTA thing, right? NAFTA's, it's funny to hear it come up these days.
Yeah.
And ended up working here, getting my green card just before 9/11. I was so lucky in management consulting and then some C-suite roles and then working at an organization that went bankrupt. And that led me into coaching because, you know, it's funny. People say, oh, you're so entrepreneurial. And I'm actually not. I'm quite risk adverse in a weird way, but it was like I was at zero and it was really easy to do this. I had been very interested, like when I was a COO, what I liked most was the kind of strategic planning and strategic talent management. And I would say I had a very up and down path through the work world. And then I found coaching and it was like, okay, so this is what I was born to do.
Yeah.
And I very typically found out I had ADHD when my oldest son got diagnosed and had never really thought about it. And, you know, you go through life just thinking, well, I have impulse control issues. I have attention issues and I just kind of can't hold focus for long. Oh, I'm so flawed. And you say that to yourself over and over until it's just who you are. And then one day someone says to you, well, actually, guess what? Like you just have a different brain and it's not better. It's not worse. It's just different.
Yeah.
So let's learn about it and let's just kind of embrace that it's a bit of a pain in the ass sometimes.
Sure.
But you know what? Knowledge is power. And I got to say, Dave, for me, that was like literally, I almost have a physical sensation of shame, like literally washing off me. And it took a while to talk about it out loud. And then I just started hearing like the most moving and sad stories of particularly adults who really carried a lot of shame for so long and felt they were less than.
Yeah.
And we know we're not, right?
Yeah, we definitely do. How old was your son when he was diagnosed?
He was just between middle and high school.
Okay.
So what does that make him, 14, 15? So a kind of late diagnosis. And, you know, he's even talked since and said, I knew things weren't right earlier, but he was very high performing, but at what cost, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I asked that too, because I was curious whether, I mean, I know for a lot of parents, especially moms who have a child diagnosed, as they are, you know, helping their child through that treatment and learning about it themselves in order to cater to their kiddo, that, you know, they often start seeing seeing it in themselves, or if they learn about the heritability traits and things like that. But I think it's also some kids, if they're older too, maybe not 14, 15, or maybe where they start learning about it, and they may call you out and say, hold on, mom or dad. Guess what? Which is kind of like me and my mom now, who's 88, and she would take us both in a bar fight.
That is so funny.
She's very healthy. She's great.
Well, but it's interesting. I am quite sensitive about my mother's 86, and she's starting to forget things in a big way. And what I'm really realizing, this is the woman who you can never find the tape and scissors and the car keys. Well, guess what? When you get to her point and you don't have systems or whatever you want to call them, systems, habits, routines of writing things down, of keeping a calendar, of whatever is your system, you are in so much deeper trouble, because she's got none of that, like those kind of formed neural pathways to scaffold dementia. And it's really hard. It's really hard. You can't start learning that stuff at 86.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I mean, I think, obviously not a doctor, but with dementia too. I mean, I think even in my dad passed of dementia and Alzheimer's. And so like, I think even with the best preparation, unfortunately with dementia, that's going to catch up at some point. But I know what you're saying and I'm curious for you, like because you've obviously had a really great successful career as a COO and so forth. Tell me a little bit about the systems. And obviously I assume, this was pre-diagnosis for you. So what were some of those systems that you had in place to be able to keep you, focused on the important tasks, running businesses and teams?
To answer that, the first part of that would be, and I'm sure you've heard this from other folks. I've heard it from folks I coach. I did really well in college and a lot of graduate schools, 2 of them. Yeah. But I think I worked 50 to 75% harder, not smarter, but harder than other people. And at the time, I remember these are the very old days of being in the stacks, as they were called, in the library, writing research papers with piles of note cards, and like being unable to kind of understand that there was a sort of strategic, smart way to read books, write notes, put thoughts together. Instead, I thought I had to read every book, write every note, and so everything took me a really long time, because I was wildly inefficient, which then fed into some confidence issues, and we see where that goes. And so I started by being an overworker as a way to compensate for a lack of efficiency. Yeah. Let me say it that way. And I would say that overworking was my main strategy to create some organization. Does that make sense?
It does.
To you?
Yeah, it does make sense. I almost think of like, because I'm 52 now, and I think about like the stacks, as you're saying, and how even for the least organized person and working in that environment, I almost think it's better than it is these days, because you didn't have the internet. So you know what I mean? Yeah. When you research with a browser, man, all it takes is one notification and squirrel. But I know what you mean. Yeah. Like I went through this process working on a book idea a while back, where I took years of my blog posts and I wrote them all the titles down. I had them all, I put them all into a spreadsheet, and then I wrote out the title of, and I was like, the spreadsheet's not working for me. So I wrote out the title of each blog post and like category of it in brackets on a note card. And then I had this stack of note cards and I'm like, this is what I need. And it's like hundreds of note cards. So then I put them all along. I'm like, what am I going to do with these cards? So then I put them all along this bar, this long table, and then started like looking at them, trying to categorize them and putting them in separate piles. And then I was like, yeah, what am I doing here?
Oh, Dave. And now we have AI.
Yeah.
And you could just feed it all in. Yeah.
It's amazing. I've been loving, and as a kind of early adopter in a lot of tech, I mean, I'm definitely a big fan of using AI for a lot of the work that I'm doing these days.
Oh, yeah.
Also with, there's a line that I love in technology and innovation, really, which is whoever built ships built shipwrecks. I'm not naive enough to know that I could be digging my own grave the more I feed AI, because God knows things might go really weird one day. But for now, that's the tool. So
it's a powerful one.
It sure is.
But to finish, to come back to, so that was sort of early, and I feel like that overwork carried through.
Yeah.
And I would say that, it was usually deadlines. It was usually just right on the cusp of those deadlines that got everything firing and getting the work done. Interestingly, it did change when I became a mother because I just had less time, right? And I did get more efficient because I just had to.
Yeah.
I had fewer hours available.
And the stakes are higher.
So I would say sort of the classic deadlines, and I was constantly triaging to-do lists.
Yes.
But I didn't understand. Oh, I'll do this online. Oh, and then I'll do this in a notebook. And then I kind of couldn't find everything and link it all.
Yeah.
And then I'd get frustrated, and then I'd start a new system, which now I understand. You know what? We love bright, shiny objects, and we love variety. And I used Notion for 2 years, and now I won't touch it.
I'm the same way. I was loving it.
I don't judge it.
No.
But that's the difference. It's like, you know what? I used it. It worked for me. Now I don't need it, right? Maybe I'll go back, but there's no judgment. As long as I have a system that is working for my needs.
Yeah. And that as you learn about ADHD, you learn, to your point, bright, shiny, we crave novelty. And as soon as the novelty runs out. Yeah, runs away, whatever. Then we run away from whatever solution we have found. Yeah. I have found, a couple points to what you're saying. One in particular was, I wrote a book that was published by Pearson. And people ask me, how did you write the book with undiagnosed ADHD? It's like an 80,000 word nonfiction business book. And, first of all, without my wife, I never would have finished it. So there's a very important point. But to your point, I signed a contract, I received an advance, and I had contractual dates to deliver chapters.
Thank you.
And my next book that I've been working on that I'm hoping to self-publish, I keep thinking, I'm kind of dragging my heels on it. And maybe I do need to get a publisher just so I have the contract.
I have an idea for you. So I also wrote a book. My ADHD was diagnosed. I wouldn't have finished my book if I had not taken medication. I really needed medication to kind of sit and focus on writing. But I was published by Wiley, but since it was my first book and I was totally nervous about it, I hired my own editor. So even knowing I had the contractual obligation, it was very far away, right? It's a year.
Yeah.
That's hard. So I hired my own editor, PS to anyone listening, never think you're going to make money writing a book. There's other ways it can turn into income, but give up that thought right now. Let me get that right out of your head.
Yeah.
But I hired this editor, and so I'm very well, it's funny. I respond a lot to authority, like to feeling obliged, even though I hate rules.
Yeah.
But when I've paid someone and they're counting on me, I would finish my chapter because I had to get it to her.
Yes.
Because if I didn't get it to her, then she couldn't read it, and we had a session booked, and I had to pay her for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that became the system that motivated me.
And that's what coach.
So I'm with you.
And working myself as a coach, I have found that too. Where and working with coaches in the past, we're like, well, exactly to the same point. When you pay a coach, you're paying somebody to help you with whatever projects or things that you're doing. And so, yeah, if you're not going to do the homework, I mean, you're throwing your money away. And I had a call with a prospective client today, actually, too, earlier, and he is self-diagnosed ADHD, and we were talking about coaching. And I said, I would love to help you, but in order, and I can, and I have helped plenty of people with or without ADHD. But what I was saying was, you should consider going to your doctor and getting diagnosed and possibly treated if that's what you want to do, because honestly, if you do that, you're going to find the coaching is probably going to be more effective because you're going to be able to focus and do the work. Right. So you're prolific on TikTok, man. You are blowing up on TikTok. Tell me about that.
Oh, I am so happy you brought that up. Thank you.
I've been loving the videos.
That is
yeah, you do a great job.
Did you follow me or whatever it's called?
Yeah. Okay,
good. I've been doing that for, I think it's over a year now.
Okay.
And it's a total passion project. I have a lot of passion projects. And I post every day, at least once, something about ADHD.
That's great.
And thank you. Yeah. Oh, thank you. And I don't know. I just love it. And you know what? Those folks on TikTok, they are damn smart. I'm telling you. Yeah. Because sometimes I'll post something and I'll go, that wasn't very good. And they you get 10 likes.
Yeah.
And then you post something and you think, damn, that was good. And you can see they're smart. They know what they want. And I've learned, what do you think the two things are that they like the most? The content. What would be your guess?
Probably probably a valuable tip of some sort. And then also brevity is probably key with the TikTok people.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know.
What are your...
I'm a bit long. Well, yes, they like specifics, and they love anything to do with habit formation.
Okay.
And they love anything to do with it's similar to habits, but like routines and rituals. Like I did something about a morning ritual of a client of mine, and what he did, it was kind of fun because he would get up, drink his coffee, and scroll, right?
Yeah.
And so we...
Oh, I saw that video. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Keep going. Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt for a second. Will you please do me a huge favor and go to wisesquirrels.com/survey. That's where you can share your feedback. I want to make it bigger and better for you in the new year, and I need your help. So please do this now. Go to wisesquirrels.com/survey and spend a couple minutes sharing your feedback. I really do appreciate it. Thanks.
No, and so we talked about, okay, you make the coffee, but you leave a pile of books where you drink your coffee, and you put your phone in a drawer. And you start, like, the coffee is this kind of pleasurable reward, right? You sit there, you get to drink the coffee, and you make it so easy, right? Like the environment just leads you. The phone gets put in a drawer and the books, and you can open them in the middle. You can go back where you were. You can have fiction, nonfiction.
Yeah.
And it really changed how his day began.
That's brilliant. That's such a good tip. I mean, I think of like Glengarry Glen Ross, like coffees for closers, right? No coffee until you've like done something. So as a reward, I like that. And I do that from time to time. I like, what was I thinking of there? Oh yeah. So I've been journaling more and more and I try to journal, and we splurged and bought a hot tub in 2020 when the world was imploding. And it was like the best investment ever. My wife and I say that every time we get in, and I get in daily. I love it. But for the longest time, I'd bring my phone in there and the whole like time would just fly by and I'd be like, haven't done anything. And so I stopped bringing my phone there. And one day as an experiment, I brought it like in my journal. I wrote a blog post about this a while back. I was reading a book, a nonfiction book, business book. I'm reading the book and I decided, okay, instead of bringing my phone, I'm just going to write down what I would pick up my phone to look up as I'm reading for like 20 minutes or whatever. And so I did that and I ended up with a list of like 10 different things or so. And then when I reviewed that list, I thought, okay, most of these things aren't really important. Maybe one or two would be worth looking up, but most of them are not that important. But more importantly, though, is I gauged it would be somewhere between like 3 to 5+ minutes per thing I looked up. And so then you multiply that by how many times. So that's like, 45 an hour of me picking up my phone and looking stuff up, when in reality, I didn't really need to look up any of that stuff. And instead I wrote it down. So later on I could look back at those notes and think, okay, yeah, that one I'll look up. The other stuff is stupid. I don't need to look that up. Who cares if Jack Lemmon was in Glengarry Glen Ross?
It's funny in a very different way. I got into this habit of listening to the audio files, the audio, the AI voices reading the headlines, and they're like 8-minute articles or whatever. And it cut down on how much I listen to podcasts, where I actually feel I learn a lot more.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking that I needed to shift out of that habit because, I don't know, news is usually pretty transactional. And also by the next day, it doesn't really does it really matter? I can't even think something I read today, but it really isn't that important. Oh, I know, frequent flyer mile programs, how people are using them differently. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like really but there's so many great podcasts out there. I do feel, and do you feel like this as someone with ADHD, that my version is I constantly need to be feeling I'm productive.
Yes.
Like the joke in our family is, okay, when we watch a movie, what's our mother going to do? Fold laundry, sort papers, knit. Like I can't just sit there because I'm sure that goes back to my childhood because my ADHD mother never stopped working. Right. Yeah. Like around, it's an issue. Like, because I have a meditation practice and all that, but I feel like I don't integrate that into the rest of my life. It's like I meditate, but then I'm like chasing goals all day long.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same. I definitely feel the same way of being productive. I'm definitely guilty of like you're better because you're at least being productive while you're being distracted by whatever movie or TV show you're watching. At least you're doing something productive, where like I would pick up my phone, right? And then I'd be like looking on my phone and watching the show. And I'm a big movie and TV nerd, and I love quality, good film, good television these days, especially too. So I do try to focus on what I'm watching too, because I love the cinematography and the acting and the lighting and all that stuff. So I try to.
It's worth focus.
It's worth focusing.
For me,
yeah.
This is probably one of my big struggles. For me, it's, if I can do 3 things, that's 3 times better. And it's not. I know it.
Yeah.
It is. And by the way, I end up doing a lot of them not that well because I wasn't focused. Yeah. It's like that activation.
Yeah.
And I know that feeds the dopamine.
Yeah.
But then sometimes the results are not that satisfying.
Yeah,
because they're a bit slapdash.
Yeah, or you'll have to rewind part of the show to figure out what you just missed. Because I do that.
Yeah,
it's like reading the same paragraph over and over.
Yeah,
and I think in a way it's about choosing your focus and choosing what you're going to spend time with. Like if you're investing your time in a show, let's say. And so like my wife and I just watched this series for the second time. This is what I do. I like watch shows for the first time. And if they're good, I'll convince my wife to watch it. And so I'll end up watching
Which one?
So I just watched Disclaimer on Apple TV, which is,
I haven't watched it, but I hear it's fantastic.
It's fantastic. And it's definitely worth paying attention to. I am very much, being the Toronto movie nerd guy that I am very careful about spoiling things. So I won't talk too much about it.
Don't tell me.
No.
Don't tell me.
But it's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, can I tell you a little bit about this ADHD success planner?
Yes, please. Yeah.
So I wrote Coach Yourself, which was like coaching frameworks. Yeah. But the thing people were most interested to talk about, a couple of a communications framework in it, a values exercise, and my ADHD journey. Mm-hmm. And so when I started talking on podcasts and in interviews about this, I realized that something I was just using with clients, this productivity and planning system, people were like, oh, well, tell us more. Like, well, I want to try that. And one guy in particular, a guy called Russ Jones, he has a podcast. He was like, you got to write this down. Like, you got to share this. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be 8 pages. Do this, 4 steps, and it's 70 pages, but very spaced. Yeah. It's like got a lot of sparkle for the ADHD crowd. Yeah. And, I'm really proud of my book, the one published by Wiley. But this ebook that I just published, like an ebook available off my website, I am so proud of it. Because I get every email alert when someone buys it. I need to change that. I don't know how, though. And it's like South Africa, Germany, Ireland, Oregon. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, my God, I am making a difference in these people's lives because this book helps you. There's like 3 simple pieces to it. Your planning session once a week. That is self-care. Mm. The weekly buckets with to-dos in them that you create for the week in your planning session, and then your to-do list, which becomes so easy to do. The pivotal thing here is this list of your weekly planning buckets. That arc of looking at the week in a dedicated time with your coffee or your tea, or I don't recommend wine because your plan can get a bit crazy for the week. But it's so simple, Dave, and so flexible and so personalizable, and it works.
That's amazing. Yeah, I haven't read it, so I definitely have to.
Don't worry.
I gotta grab a copy because I definitely need that too for my own planning, because that's definitely something I'm not great at is waking up in the morning and looking at my calendar to see what do I have in store today without thinking long term sometimes. I mean, that's definitely something I'm guilty of.
Well, and I think there's something about, I wish I had research to back this up, but from my clients and from everything I've seen, there's something about the time block of a week that is a really important organizing principle. And when you sit down in this planning session, like it's laid out in the book, and you go, okay, what are my buckets? Oh, one of mine, for example, is business admin, right? That bucket usually doesn't change. what's in it each week changes, and always the fourth week of the month is invoicing is in there. But there's sometimes I don't even have daily to-do lists, but the power of having collected kind of the priorities for the week, but not in a laundry list, in a categorized, manageable way, is really a powerful way for my brain to stay on track during the week.
Is it analog mainly or digital?
So yeah, you can do it however you want, but everybody who uses it, except for a couple of people, have said that it's most powerful when they write it out.
Yeah.
And I have people, like clients, that have project management systems, like complex calendars that are color coordinated, and you have to have a calendar too. But then, okay, that's a lot, right, to manage. Okay, on one piece of paper, what are my 6 categories, what I call buckets, and what's in them that is really the focus this week?
Yeah, I've done something similar years ago that I stole from, I think it was Michael Hyatt had something called My Ideal Week or something like that. And I created a variation of it in digital form, which was a Google Calendar. And I had, it sounds similar to the idea here, but where I would have blocks. So I would have, instead of like specific items on the calendar, I would have like blocks of time, like 3 hours for this and 3 hours for that, or 2 hours for that, and so on. And then the theory was, then I would have my regular work calendar and my family calendar, and I could, with Google Calendar, you can turn them on and off, so you can overlay them.
Yeah.
So you can see what fits into what. And then the theory for me was, and it would work sometimes until a point, which is, okay, moving forward, okay, we're going to meet to do this interview, and I'm only doing these interviews at this time of day or in this block. I can see on the calendar that it's in the wrong block and I need to move it to a different block, or whatever the task is, so that it doesn't, so it fits in the correct block. Where I start to slip is when deciding what to do, and then that thing becomes email, and then email takes all day.
Yeah.
Because it's business development, and it's admin, and it's sales, and it's invoicing, because it's all email.
Right.
Any tips about that? Like getting lost in the inbox?
Yeah. Well, so one thing, just responding to your calendar, is this is a classic, right? And this is what I try to coach people to do. If you have your meetings listed in your calendar, which, I mean, you would be shocked by the number of people with ADHD who don't. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how anyone in 2020, I said today, how anyone in 2023, and someone was like, yes, 2024.
I do that all the time.
I don't know how anybody today exists without a calendar. You can't. So, but let's say if I look at my calendar for tomorrow, my calendar tomorrow is literally back to back with like 3 half hours for the whole day open. Okay. If I now, after this, get off, look at here's my weekly, you can't see it, but that's my weekly bucket list. Yeah. If I start to do a to-do list tomorrow with 10 items, and then I look at my calendar and realize I have literally 3 half-hour periods, I am setting myself up for failure, for self-recrimination. But if I look at my calendar and go, okay, what's realistic in 2 hours of working time?
Yeah.
Then I can do what you're talking about. I can slot in half an hour. Like, I'm committed to working on my book proposal half an hour a day. I'll get there. Yeah. So I'll put that in a half-hour slot. I'll probably leave 1 half hour for email. Now, if I have a huge deadline the next day, okay, I know what am I doing tomorrow night? I might have to work. But you can't put 25 laundry list to-dos when your calendar has 8 hours of meetings.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Now, then the question is, executives will say, well, I still have to get all those to-dos done. That's another podcast episode.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, those are just very simple building blocks that also make us feel like I feel way more in control when I get most of the things done I say I'm going to do, but I can't if I don't set myself up for success.
No, you're 100%. And I think that there's so much power to analog as well, like to pen and paper. I do.
So powerful.
There's I believe it's called the production effect, where it helps your memory remember what you're writing down. So it actually makes you more engaged because you're physically writing it down. It helps you actually retain that information too. But even just striking things off a list with ink as opposed to, digitally ticking a box, it's just so much more satisfying.
It's that,
man,
a little dopamine.
This time is racing by and I'm loving the conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything I missed asking you about or any questions you have for me at all?
I really wanted to make sure I just talked a little bit about like what's in this extremely flexible. And by the way, this is not how I make a living, right?
Yeah.
This is the cost of an oat milk latte in Manhattan.
Right.
So most people, I won't say everyone, and if anyone wants it and can't afford it, find me and I will give you the code and you can have it for free. I think the one thing I want to just say is planning and prioritizing don't solve everything, but they need a reframe as self-care, because you're not doing it to make other people happy. You're doing it to take control of your life, your schedule, to build your confidence, to lower your cortisol, and to start the week feeling empowered, not behind the game already.
I agree.
So
yeah.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely. I mean, I think also when you reframe, like I've found success in reframing things beyond, because what happens is I beat myself up when I'm not hitting those deadlines or doing that work. Yeah. And so for me, I find that instead of focusing on my wins, if I focus on the results, which are, a trip for my family somewhere or supporting a charity or, someone I care about, like financially helping my kids get through college, God help us there. But you know what I mean? Like all these things that are bigger than myself, or even just doing this podcast. I mean, I'm looking for sponsors. I'm trying to make this, to do this more frequently and so on. And I'm doing it also because after learning from, and I've said it ad nauseum at this point on the show, but learning from Russ Barkley about life expectancy for those with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD is up to 13 years less, or can be.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. And learning that changed this little mission of mine, this little passion project of Wise Squirrels to my mission, because the more people I can educate through my workshops, through my presentations, through this podcast or on the blog or wherever, the more people I can reach, the more those who think they might have ADHD can go and get tested and get the treatment they need. And because there's a lot at stake, and the world's a lot better with you in it. Yeah.
And Dave, that so resonates because I think that for me, it's about eliminating pain and shame and, shedding the pain and upping the potential, because everyone has so much to offer. And there are so many incredibly flawed self-narratives that get in the way of our ability to achieve our potential. And I really feel like the ADHD is so real, and it causes so much pain in so many lives. And the fact that so much of it goes undiagnosed And it's almost a bit of a joke today, right? Oh yeah, I must have ADHD, or oh, everybody seems to have a diagnosis. It diminishes how real it is. And I am so happy there are people like you, and I'll put myself in this category, that like feel real intrinsic motivation to get the word out, to help people, and to just let people know they're not alone, and it's your brain is wired differently. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this has been amazing. How can people get a hold of you and inquire about your amazing coaching and your book and so forth?
Sure. So the ebook is on my website under, I think it's under ADHD. It's not that hard to find. I'm on LinkedIn. My name, Antonia Bowring. I'm on TikTok. Thank you for finding me.
Yeah.
Antonia Bowring 963. And yeah, those are the main ways.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just what a lovely conversation, and thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thanks for joining me. This has been a ton of fun. So yeah, and I'll make sure to include links in the show notes so folks can click on over and book some time with you. Well, this has been awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks for tuning in to Wise Squirrels. Please make sure you follow the show so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed the show, leave a review, please, and visit wisesquirrels.com/love for bonus content, audio comments that you can leave, membership information, free coaching, sponsorship details, booking information, and much more. Drop by wisesquirrels.com/love. Check out the link in the episode description below and explore now. Thanks again for listening. Happy New Year, Wise Squirrel. It's going to be a great year.